I'm really excited again about our next speaker. Anish Chopra is the co-founder and president of Care Journey. For those of you who may not know, Anish was the former assistant to the president, President Obama at the time, and also the very first chief technology officer of the US. He's going to provide a short talk, about 20 minutes or so, describing the landscape of digital innovations currently supporting primary care envisioned in the shared principles. The NASEM report, as you may know, recognizes the key role of that technology plays in strengthening primary care. So with that, please welcome Anish to the stage.
Thank you very much for having me this morning, and to Anne, very much appreciate the conversation. Let me begin by just saying I'm bullish that this is going to be a chapter in healthcare delivery reform where the principles that we've been hearing about this morning and you've been talking about for the past couple of years in the NASEM report will be, I hope, naturally funded and scaled. That's at least the bet the policymakers are making. I'm going to do my best to make the case. But let me begin with a little bit of context. When President Obama ran for office, he had made the commitment on the campaign stage that he would effectively bring technology, data, and innovation as a muscle into policymaking. In Washington, and you could hear some of that in the early panel, we normally think of ourselves as sort of lobbying for Congress to maybe fund programs that are worthy but haven't been supported as they should be. Or maybe you go to the executive branch and you try to argue for rules and regulations. We heard some discussion about what rules and regulations should be adjusted. But the president had a bit of a bottom-up change philosophy, and increasingly with technology, data, and innovation, under the right conditions, there may be a chance to influence change that feels more like government with a lowercase g, neighborhood to neighborhood. And that philosophy required a core foundation that didn't quite exist. Maybe the debate will be that it doesn't quite still exist in healthcare, but let me make that argument for you. First, we as a nation should be investing in the building blocks of an innovation economy. In the old days, this was investments in roadways, railways, and runways. Today, for sure, it's about human capital. We heard a lot about training. It's about R&D. There are digital infrastructure. We heard some of the broadband challenges. And for some, we actually also see information as infrastructure. Data held by the government, as one example, has been the fuel for our weather economy. Many of you got Anne's message this morning. We're not delaying. The weather held. But all of the billions of dollars of sensors that are funded by the Commerce Department make their way into databases that are now accessible to every one of us. Your kids that wish to just play with the data, Weather Channel, which has a multi-billion-dollar business, all built upon a more open platform on account of the investments in our public sector. Second, we need rules of the road that can constrain ill behavior and promote better behavior. You normally see this in the digital economy around rules of privacy, rules of security. I had a bit of a heart palpitation on the Cleveland Clinic Google Drive comment. I'm with you in spirit, sister. I will just say there is a better way. I'll happily have that conversation with you. Having said that, we do need rules of the road. To me, probably the most important part of that rule of the road is that we have fair and open markets. And the reason I mention that is that our healthcare economy is unique in the world in that we are built on a private sector model. We have very strong public policy objectives, and often those two struggle. And we have, to some degree, many examples where we've crossed that line. The economic forces have not really been to the betterment of the system. In other cases, we haven't had enough capital deployed to advance what we want the policy objectives to be. So we've been trying to find that Goldilocks moment. I have referred to this as the moment of a health information fiduciary, and for obvious reasons, coordinated teams in primary care are the natural home to be the advocate for individuals and to exercise their rights. We'll say more about that momentarily. But the third layer that President Obama highlighted was the need to have an all-hands-on-deck approach. This is a bit of his philosophy, and I don't mean to only blame, I'm not making this a partisan issue. President Trump, believe it or not, endorsed all these same principles, so we don't have a heart attack on politics. This is one of those weird areas where there's remarkable bipartisanship. If you stick in the enabling the innovation economy to make healthcare better, that is like massively bipartisan, okay? So this concept here, I remember we launched a program called Startup America, and a Stanford professor shared, look, the best way to think about the innovation economy, and we're going to have a bit of a bazaar today to walk you through some of the examples, many of whom are my friends, by the way, so I'm excited about this presentation, is that you look to where the rules of the road are changing, and the assumption is that the innovators, nonprofit, for-profit, need not matter, the change agents, they get to that future state faster than, let's call it the incumbents. And so the key question in my mind, as I look to take this innovation philosophy into the healthcare domain, is to kind of get at the core, let's follow the same logic. We've now spent a decade putting in electronic health records and digitizing a lot of what's happening in healthcare infrastructure. We have rules of the road that continue to adjust. We're literally implementing the Cures Act, signed in a bipartisan way 4 years ago. No, more than that, not 2016, 6 years ago. But the rules are going live, which provide rights to consumers to have their health information analyzed by anyone they trust, including their care team. Rights to physicians to be able to bring a better communications app that's safe and secure, that allows you to avoid the annoying interfaces at the medical record, but can be a little bit more of a built for purpose. And rights to facilitate networks to communicate better. So insurance companies, physician networks, health systems, and to create what is really more of a population-based sharing model in addition to the individuals. So we've got an infrastructure in the Cures Act that goes live this calendar year. Reminder, by the way, all the EHR companies that we've been investing in have to deliver this upgraded technology that's got interoperability built in through what's called the FHIR API, which is sort of internet connections, no later than 12/31 of this year. So if you run a primary care clinic, as ONC would say to you, ask your EHR vendor when they choose to ship this technology to you. CMS just finalized the physician fee schedule, and they've asked all doctors to turn on this very technology by September of next year. Good, bad, or indifferent, this may be annoying or liberating, depending on where you sit. But it is the rule of the road. So we're all kind of we're in the middle of the biggest upgrade in healthcare IT since the beginning of the High-Tech Act. By the way, part of what my anxiety is, I'm not asking you about football versus soccer, but I am anxious about, did any of you know that you had these obligations? Does anyone know when you're getting a Cures Act EHR upgrade and if you can make the September deadline? Does anybody have any clue what I'm talking about? Yeah, that is a problem. So just maybe for 1 second, reminder, when we built these electronic health records, we had this dream, okay, and I'll be as guilty as charged that I wish this was like life is perfect in policymaking, but it's not. The dream was to thread the following needle. We knew the Affordable Care Act, not in name, but in concept, was going to come through. We were in the High-Tech Act was, obviously during the Recovery Act, so first thing out of the gate. So we had a $30 billion investment. We said, okay, if we simply wrote a Best Buy coupon to every doctor, they would go buy the software that existed on the market, and the software was not about the NASEM shared principles. Billing, coding, right? Really data locker kind of a thing. But if we were to dream a coordinated future, population health-based future, then we would have structured data capture, interoperability at the outset, organizations with teams that can interpret not just who the patients are that are visiting you today, but the 98% of your panel that isn't, but maybe a few who should because their conditions are deteriorating. That was the dream. And so we said, okay, we're going to try to build requirements for the future unclear state, but we know there isn't a demand signal for the electronic health systems to deliver the population-based work because the economics were tied to the fee-for-service. So we said, okay, we're going to do it in 3 parts. We're going to digitize, get everybody to collect a minimum data set that we could then share and use to keep people healthy. I mean, the Million Hearts program is probably the most important. People were annoyed. Why does a psychiatrist have to record blood pressure in the medical record? That was annoying. Well, it was because I visited the VA, and when they adopted a universal blood pressure screening program across every specialty in the DC market, their patients that had blood pressure under control went from like 25% to 75%. Why? Because the minute they would meet a specialist for an unrelated issue and they had elevated blood pressure, they were immediately referred to primary care down the hall, and they were able to manage adjustments to the meds. Anyway, very powerful case study, hit me like a ton of bricks when I was thinking through what these issues were. And we made those decisions. But we had this like sensitive issue, like let's take the Band-Aid off a little bit. A requirement for stage 1, we'll add requirements in stage 2, and then maybe this magical third stage, like around 2014 or so, we could have this beautiful interoperable medical record. Didn't happen. A lot of folks did what they had to do for stage 1, and then compliance for stages 2 and 3 didn't quite keep up to snuff. So the Cures Act came out and said what we need is a universal language. We have thousands of electronic health record systems. They have to be able to speak to each other in a common language. That common language is called the FHIR API, Fast Health Information Resources, interoperable resources. These APIs are now required of every piece of software that you will use from 2023 on. There's an API for any consumer app. There's an API for your own medical practice to be able to download the not Google but better communication app. And there's a version of Google that would work. I'm not being, I love everybody. But just to be clear, the HIPAA security issue is an issue. And then the third one is that we wanted to make sure that you could share population level. So if the VA had veterans that were cared for at Metro Health because of a Mission Act, maybe a dozen of them would come in, you should be able to share for that dozen kind of a more easy access to pull the medical records in and out. And that is all possible through the regulated FHIR API. I am worried that not a lot of folks know about it. But the good news is that foundation is ready for us to get to work. If my advice on any of this is, I don't know what your economic models are. To some degree, there's HRSA dependency. I heard a lot of that earlier. The CMS Innovation Center is begging you to come in. The water is warm. They can front load the capital now in the Medicare Shared Savings Program. If primary care is about 3% of the overall pie, this can get you to 4, 5, 6% cash flow, so we can reinvest those dollars to fund the care teams on a bet that we have we can address the savings on the other side by reducing unnecessary hospitalizations, which continue to be, double-digit percentages of our admissions today, as well as emergency room visits that could have been primary care manageable had we been more connected to the patient. So, where do I see this innovation landscape on this foundation? If you can hug a risk-bearing network, whether you take on the risk or you partner with someone who's willing to take on the risk, you should be able to free up the capital to demonstrate the demand for the services you want out of the information systems in front of you. As an example, and I remember one of our contestants, if you will, in the Bazaar is about giving individual consumers their own kind of personal assistant. Imagine that personal assistant being sponsored by your clinics, and it has access to the claims history of the patient and what you've got in the medical record and any specialist visits, and it can run decision support to help them make smarter decisions along the way when they're not in your clinic. Technology will enable us to do that. By the way, if you've ever used this chat GPT thing that came out over the weekend, the nerds are going crazy over it. It's unbelievable. It is coming to healthcare. It'll help us reduce a lot of the administrative burden. You might want to modernize the electronic health record system. The one you have now may not be up to snuff. You might want to make sure you've got one that will position for you what it would mean to be a connected, interoperable platform. And I'm grateful you've got two of them here today that will walk you through what that future state looks like. One that allows doctors to be productive. Healthcare is the only sector in the US economy where after our $30 billion investment, productivity went down, not up. Sorry, that's not acceptable. So what we have to do is unleash productivity applications to do what is right. We're increasing the faxes from certified electronic health records to other health systems. More faxes today, not less. It's unbelievable. So we got to fix that. So you're going to see a next generation of electronic health record systems that are allowing you to more easily program it like an Excel spreadsheet with a macro. So it doesn't require a PhD in physics to make your life a little bit better. You're going to see the use of advanced technologies like artificial intelligence that can mine all of the publicly available data. I was thrilled this week, a specialist posted on Twitter that frustrated by United with some prior authorization nightmare, he actually had ChatGPT write the letter for him in 30 seconds so that he could get his patient the treatment that they needed. And he just published a video about that. It's coming. So the role of AI, you'll hear more about AI in some of the teams that are here. And then last but not least, I think there's an opportunity to understand that we may, as a healthcare system, need to separate technology, nouns, things you have to buy that you may not have the money for, to data, which allows us to decouple information from the source systems. We have way too many proprietary silos in healthcare. What's up, Kavitha? Good to see you. That's my girl. So, my colleague in the Obama administration. What we need is a way to separate it out. So if we have a data layer, we have the ability to bring in pharmacists into the care team, practitioners of all the sorts that you were saying, and everyone can start to have their own window on the patient's health profile. It's the verb version of the noun VA longitudinal record that we heard about a minute ago. That opening up that data platform will allow us to do more, and you'll hear some of the presenters today talk about that. But I leave you with this final observation. The reason I have hope is that we are shifting the economics of the healthcare model. The Medicare Innovation Center has set a bold goal. 100% of Medicare and the vast majority of Medicaid shall be in coordinated care relationships by the end of 2030, which means more capital will... Primary care ain't going to win a battle on which fee-for-service billing code is going to go up or down in the annual physician fee schedule fight. That's not a thing anyone here in this room has visions that we're going to solve for. But if we move to value, we can take responsibility to reallocate those dollars within networks. And natural and economic forces would put more resources into primary care so you can do your work, not through one-time grant funding, but by the core DNA of how the model works. Participate in these public-private partnerships, engage, and live and breathe the system that you want for the families that you treat. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Hello. We're going to gather around as much as these front tables. No sitting back in the pews in the church. You have to come forward and come on up. And these people are going to give you a presentation for 8 minutes, and we're all set. Take it away.
Do you want to say anything first? Welcome, one and all. We're going to talk about how to integrate data and make your life easy as you move forward. It's exciting to hear what's going to happen with FHIR and all these other exciting things. But frankly speaking, data will do for your mind what imaging has done for our vision over the past part of my career. It'll make it clear what's happening to your population, whether they're in front of you or away from you. So I think we have a really nice group of folks here today. We have Upstream, and then we have Innovacer, which is the foundation under organizations like Upstream. So go ahead and you can start a little bit about Upstream.
I'm Dave Grapey. I'm the Chief Medical Officer for Upstream. And I promise you at first, this is not going to seem very digital. This is going to be more...
Come on over, you guys.
Yeah, come on. In essence, Upstream is a global risk-bearing managed service company that supports primary care and senior members in Medicare and Medicare Advantage through a pharmacy-led care team model. But there's a lot more to it than that. And the best way to really talk about Upstream is really how it came into being and the problems that we were trying to solve. So before I had the opportunity to be the CMO at Upstream 6 or 7 months ago, I was the Chief Clinical Officer for an ACO in North Carolina, owned by a health system. About 10 years of escalating risk in government programs and in full risk MA contracts. 1,200 docs, half employed, half not, 30 different disparate EMR systems that we tried to connect. And we had fairly good success, especially the last half of the decade. But the reality was that the status quo wasn't going to cut it if we were going to be really successful going forward. We knew that there was tremendous competition in primary care. We could see it in our own market. We knew that we had to stop just giving primary care doctors incentives and bonuses for doing the work, but we really had to pay them for true value-based care. We also had to do more to support them. The ask was becoming really almost intolerable. The number of HEDIS and med adherence measures that needed to be addressed, we kept pushing them for high-value visits, imperative things that needed to be done, risk adjustment coding, and then to also work on patient experience without really having the support that we could provide. And that was one of the things that was frustrating to me, was the variation I saw. We had practices with resources that were doing all these things extremely well and really moving along in value-based care. We had other practices that were really struggling. And despite the attempts to try to support them, there was only so much we could do. We knew that we needed, given the risks that we were going to be taking in the new direct contracting and ACO REACH models, we knew that we needed a more advanced primary care model to really move forward. And so if you then back up another 2 years from when we were dealing with these issues, into our town came a founder of Upstream, Fergus Hoban, who as a pharmacist had always been really frustrated by the underutilization of pharmacists within a clinical team to really manage and help manage chronic conditions and medical complexity. And he had come to us with an idea to pilot putting pharmacists in primary care through a CCM services at no risk to primary care, and to see how that works. And so over time, we saw substantial improvement in various quality parameters, especially around med adherence. We saw declining utilization of unnecessary events. We saw tremendous stakeholder satisfaction, both on the primary care side as well as the patient side. And so they expressed an interest in going from fee-for-service to global risk. We felt this was exactly the advanced primary care model we needed to address all the things that we were looking for, and also to better the care for patients and to be more successful in full risk. And so there's a long story around how that affiliation came into being. We decided to expand the care model away from just CCM to incorporate all at-risk patients. The pharmacy team was expanded to include a coordinating nurse that goes out and meets people where they need to be. We've expanded the four walls of the clinic through, obviously, integration with patient ping and understanding where our patients are at all times, adding concierges to that team to reach out to patients. And so this entire care team has expanded for us to deliver these services. And we've now used analytics to target the patients that are best served by chronic care management, and not just trying to get this through a fee-for-service model, but really looking through it through a value-based care lens. Now, to solve the problem on the value-based care payment side, we developed a model called GAPQ, which is Guaranteed Advance Payments for Quality. So we are able to look at the performance of our primary care practices. We have a set of metrics that are aligned with our contractual obligations and also what we know needs to be successful in value-based care. And so this is med adherence, HEDIS measures, some utilization measures. And we have a metric, it's a STAR composite score. We pay our primary care doctors $15 up to $30 per member per month for their performance on these quality and utilization metrics, regardless of whether we have shared savings or not. So it's not maybe money anymore. It's not a reconciliation 18 months after you've done the work, but it's actually more real-time payment and not incentive. It's a real payment for value-based care work that then goes and allows for primary care doctors to actually bring in the resources and spend the effort and time they need to be successful. Sounds very analog. Underneath all this, all the work we do is built on a chassis of Innovacer. We have to be able to take all of the resources, the information that we're getting, and bring it into one place. We can't ask primary care to sign on to 14 different systems and look at this system for your heart failure patients and go over here for your behavioral health. We need to integrate all that. And so when you have 30 different EMRs, our entire care team has their platform, their work, their scheduling, their outreach. Everything is built on the Innovacer platform, and as we integrate those into the EMRs and our workflow. So Liz, if you want to add to that and tell more about how the Innovacer works.
Definitely. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Liz Guerin. I'm the Customer Innovation Director at Innovacer, and I've worked closely with Dr. Grapey over the last really 2.5 years. And I'm not always concise, but I know I only have 2 minutes. But, so I did, of course, bring up a couple notes, but something I do want to highlight about Upstream is this unique model that they have built is really revolved around the person and environment. It's a much different model than I've ever seen for CCM. And I've been lucky enough to be the first, to be the person that's been leading to ensure that this technology is actually rolled out to support exactly what he was talking about. So the way that Innovacer supports Upstream at this point is it allows all these different versions of, think about all the different data sources that we get from patients, or about patients, patient ping, all the different EMRs. We've got LabQuest, we've got our LabCorp, we've got all claims, and we are able to put that information into, not me, the engineers, are able to put that into information that means something to us and then push that to the products that Upstream is using. As Dr. Grapey mentioned, the clinical teams are literally utilizing Upstream as their entire source, their entire platform. And I mean, it's just like our emails, right? Like that is their core central place to go. And what's been beautiful is we have out-of-the-box features that they've been using, such as protocols, assessments, anything like that that is part of the work stream. But we also work collaboratively with Upstream. They have some very tech-savvy people who also build their own protocols, and we do co-development of actual features too. So we have out of the box, and then also they help us. Really, at the end of the day, what our job is to be the role in the background to ensure that these teams can work as operationally efficiently and have the best outcomes for patients. And it's been proven through, as Dr. Grapey mentioned, Fergus, the co-founder, he has played out this model, and it's we just look forward to continue to supporting you guys. But definitely.
So going back to to the Obama campaign and sitting with Kavita Patel and Anish and their vision of what they wanted to do, I took that back to IBM at the time I was the medical director there, and I thought it was going to take an IBM to do that. With some frustration, I retired from IBM and found Innovacer, and they were willing to and had the ability to do all the things that vision entailed. So, taking disparate data, cleaning it up, processing it, using a bit of AI to make it clear, and being able to put that into a practice in the form of a virtual huddle, right? This saves the average primary care doc about 3.2 minutes of time per patient and makes your life a lot simpler. When you heard the complexity of taking what's now going to transpire with fire and your requirements to do fire, how do we make that much easier for you working with our partners, and at the same time save you money, right? So, I mean, that's kind of our vision. So it's pretty exciting. I think we've made a huge amount of progress, and we've got much more to go. But yeah, it's pretty exciting. I think we're open now for questions and comments and thoughts and dialogues. This is supposed to be more time for you guys to interact with us than us shouting about what we do. By the way, I was an advisor for Innovaccer when we first started getting kicked off, became an employee for a while, and going back to being an advisor. So I'm retiring as an employee as of the end of this month, but I'll still be there working as advisor. And the advice I want to give is coming from you at the practice level of how we can make your life easier. I mean, in theory, we should be doing all the coding, sitting in your practices, understanding what your pain is.
So I think, when I hear some of the other comments and presentations from this morning, as much as Innovaccer is a chassis, so is Upstream. So we have a lot to do. We have looked and explored, for example, behavioral health, but how do we bring that on our chassis? One of the things that we want to do is continue to avoid fragmentation. We really believe in linear integrity. And so we've seen a lot of great solutions in a lot of different areas of healthcare, but how do we incorporate that again so that it's part of an entire care team and you're not looking to very disparate solutions, and how do you unite those? And I think that the other thing that one of our missions is to improve productivity for primary care, in the sense we want them to be able to do what's most important to them, and that's interact with patients. And so our pharmacists deal with things like prior auths and do the work on getting patients medical assistance for their medications. And so there are things that are being done and freeing up primary care that hopefully do improve that productivity for addressing the other things that need to be addressed. So.
And comprehensive medication management results in a 12.7% reduction in butts and beds. I mean, it really impacts the cost of healthcare by reducing the need to have folks who shouldn't be in the hospital not in the hospital, because the simplest thing you can do in medicine is when you give somebody a pill for them to take it. I mean, it's a whole lot easier to do that than change somebody's behavior and getting them to exercise. But if we can't even do that right, it's pretty difficult.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, please.
So, I am not an IT person by any stretch.
Don't worry about that.
Listening to Anish this morning about, finally the Cures Act is going to fix the issues that we had with high tech, $30 billion investment, decline in productivity.
Oh, here.
Ouch. So is what he's envisioning for 2023 going forward through FHIR and these open APIs, what you've already been able to accomplish with the technology you have? I mean, would that be fair to say, or are there differences in terms of what your technology is able to do versus what Cures is going to be unleashing?
I think both of our technology is based on the vision of what they want to do with Cures, and just making that much easier. I mean, the complexity of taking, he talked about opening up so everybody has an EMR. Well, Innovaccer can map to almost all of them, right? So we can take data from anybody's EMR, cleanse it, process it, mix it with claims, mix it with pharmacy data, and put it on Upstream in your practice so that you can really access it. Think about it. When I went to a practice utilizing this, the person calling to confirm the appointment had that information, could go ahead and start working on that patient that day. The front office, you talked about the importance of the MA. The front office at the MA has the information they need to begin acting on that patient. That information includes whether they have food or not, right? Whether they've taken their medicine or not. All those kind of information is right in their purview, and they can see it right in their EMR.
Yeah, and to answer your question regarding FHIR APIs, so we have APIs set up presently on the Upstream instance. we have an architectural shift that we're doing that supports Fire API. So we are doing that as Innovator, as a company. It's just that we have to migrate into that where it will be a heck of a lot cleaner than us trying to use it in the present architecture. So that is something that is upcoming for all of us and is going to be so much fun.
And we know those practices are still using other APIs other than Fire.
Oh, of course.
So we want to make that life easier, and they can give us the information in whatever format they have, and we'll convert it to Fire, right? We'll make that transformation for them.
And yeah, oh. Do you have a question, sir?
I don't want to take the floor from anybody else who has a question. But,
No, please.
Larry, I get to work with Ann and the PCC team. And one thing that came up actually last year when we did a virtual conference was, you know, as we move towards new value-based care models, new technology in primary care, you know, we've got to, it's like redoing the wiring in your house while you're still living in it. You know, if you're a practice trying to make it and serve patients, particularly with less resources, you know, you don't necessarily have the capital to invest in changing workflows or technology, and you certainly don't have the time because you're trying to see those patients to keep the lights on. What kind of solutions can upstream bring to those practices?
So that's exactly the kind. So when you think about the ask of primary care and value-based care, so across all the things that you need to do. So number one, there's an expectation that you close gaps and do this thing. So our pharmacists, we have pharmacists who specifically, in addition to doing the medical management, are attuned to the quality gaps. Certainly they're critical in med adherence, making sure patients have, doing all the prior auths, doing all the things they need to do to address that. We're involved in clinic using patient ping to understand when patients are coming in. So we either help facilitate transitions of care for patients and the practice and getting those people in. We help them when patients go to the ED to do the outreach to find out if patients have any ongoing issues or concerns and help the primary care physicians with those important high-value visits. We actually collate data and bring it to the point of care so they're not going on 5 or 6 or 10 different disparate systems from all the payers, so they know what their gap lists are and can help us do all those things. And you have a care team. So you have a nurse going out to manage complex patients, you know, whether it's getting a shower rail for them or whether it's addressing some of their social determinant needs. So it's this entire chassis and care team, very much like other, you know, places have built to help support primary care. And then it's this payment for value-based care that's a payment. It's not an incentive. You know what you're getting if you're doing this, so you can now budget. How do you put in, can we hire somebody else in the office to do these things? Well, I can if I know I'm getting $14,000 a month in gap Q payments. And so that's for every one of your attributed patients. So there's a true payment for value-based care services, not just this, oh, maybe money that we talked about. So I think it's shoulder-to-shoulder support, it's financial support, it's technologic support, and it's a whole care team support. So it really is across that, and, you know, yeah.
So the upstream is that they're going to pay you up front to do that, so you have the money to do the transformation.
Well, and I wanted to add just one other piece. So to address about the resourcing and everything, that because that's a real concern. The thing that I have seen with formerly, now I'm only dedicated to upstream, but even just former customers, is we do have a point of care tool that does surface and allows what's going on, care, you know, chronic care wise, protocol wise, meaning where are they, what's their care plan, what are the open gaps, what are suspect codes or in actual drop codes, and that surfaces the minute that the doctor looks up the EMR. And that is a way to really, really help with the resourcing portion.
I saw a 1 minute finger there. I'm not
Oh, yeah.
quite sure what that means.
Oh, thank you.
Which one? We can share.
Okay.
Sorry. Susie Nelson. I'm with the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and we're involved in behavioral health integration. So this is a question related to that, but not only inclusive of that. Is there hardware and software support also for remote patient monitoring when that is indicated as a part of the value-based care?
There is. So we have remote patient monitoring as part of that whole care team model. And so it's primarily centered around heart failure and some of the other chronic conditions. But behavioral health is a big piece of this where I think we have an opportunity. And what we're really looking at now is this a buy build. Do we work with somebody doing coordinated care, which would integrate really nicely in our model? So there's a couple different options. In our community, we've had Quartet as a referral base. We've had, Rubicon to help support primary care, at least with some sort of curbside consultation. But I think a real robust solution that would be scalable is something we're working on right now to add to this whole care team, because that's a really important component.
And that's part of the Innovacer platform, is that we work with other partners that do remote patient monitoring. And if you have a better idea of how to do that and know somebody who is, we'd love to partner with you.
So how do we scale this up? Because what you're talking about can work on a small scale, but what you're talking about is so fundamental that it begs the question of why not scale it up rapidly. And the corollary question to that is,
this is our last question.
Many primary care folks have invested in electronic medical records from one vendor or another, and they're working in a system where transactions are really the business case for the medical record being digitized. It's a billing instrument. So how do we scale up?
Yeah,
how do we get around the billing?
That's what this does. It scales it up.
focus?
It can take anybody's EMR. We don't care where that data comes from or what format it is. We can take that, integrate it with claims data, clinical data, social determinants of health data, pharmacy data, and with our partners, put it back on your EMR, drop it into your EMR as if it was without clicking. And we've done that now for what, 100 million folks already, so it's pretty well scaled up.
And we're scaling the upstream model as quickly as our investors will allow. It's a very capital intensive model, as you can imagine, to bring these care teams. So we've expanded from our little local ACO, 100,000 lives. We're doubling for 2023. We've signed agreements with Tidewater Physicians in Virginia and also the Medical University of South Carolina. Both those deals were announced within the past few weeks. So we'll have close to 3,000 physicians. We'll now have closer to 200,000 Medicare lives that are on this combined platform, really, of Upstream and Innovacer. And we'll have some growth in 24 as well, again, given the constraints of what people feel comfortable with, because there's really more interest than there is capacity to some degree. So.
Yeah, and I know we have to close out. I think there's one more component to add to that is when you talk about the scalability portion and also using Innovacer, the entire goal is to be able to do everything within Innovacer. We are not a billing platform, so that is one portion of where we are different, right, than an EMR, where we can actually submit billing codes through the EMR. But what we have done, in fact, this is something we just finished building out for Upstream, is the entire CCM timer, CCM flow of the timing, the actual billable activities, and then submitting the care plan and all information that's required back into the EMR, where they can do that cross-check before the billing department does submit the codes for CCM. So that is the way that we're working around not being an actual billing platform, but being able to get all that information there.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much, guys.
So welcome. This is the Upstream Innovacer conversation. It's really built on the vision that Anish had of figuring out how to support primary care practices to transform, particularly with the addition of FHIR, and how we can do for your mind what X-ray and imaging has done for your vision and make it clear what's happening with data.
Good morning, everybody. Dave Grapey. I'm the Chief Medical Officer for Upstream. And in essence, Upstream is a global risk-bearing managed service company that really supports primary care and the senior members of the panel in Medicare and Medicare Advantage through a pharmacist-led care team model. And so I know that sounds very analog, and it is, but our partner in Innovation is where we really bring the digital aspect. And to really talk about Upstream, I think it's best served by talking about how it got its beginning and what problems it was trying to solve. So before I was the Chief Medical Officer for Upstream, I had the opportunity to be the Chief Clinical Officer for the ACO, where Upstream really came into being. And we had an ACO in North Carolina, 1,200 members, owned by a health system, half employed, half independent, 30 different EMRs, and so lots of aggregation and difficulty doing those things. And we were in escalated risk for a decade, culminating with being in the DCE program after NextGen and had 100,000 full risk lives in MA. But we also realized that going forward, the status quo wasn't going to be enough to be successful. And there were a number of issues that we could see. Number one, on the primary care side, we had to move away from this idea that we're just bonusing and incenting primary care to do this work. This is value-based care work that requires dedication and really needs true payment. It can't be maybe money. We were successful, but we were always reconciling 6 months after the performance year and paying 6 to 18 months after the work was done. We were becoming, the burden on our primary care docs was and continues to be problematic with the asks on the quality gaps, the risk adjustment work, patient experience, do the high value visits, all the things that we're asking them, and yet again, only having potentially maybe money for them. And despite the fact that we were in value-based care for 10 years, there was still what I felt to be disturbing amounts of variation in the ability for our practices to be successful in these things. We had very high-performing practices with plenty of resources and others that didn't. And so it was really a limit about what we could do. We could provide some data, we could provide some assistance, but at the very end of the day, it was really up to primary care to do that largely. And we also knew we were getting into riskier and riskier models, and that we really needed to advance our primary care model if we were going to be successful in going forward. And right about that, about 2 years prior to that, the founder of Upstream had come to our community. He was a pharmacist, and he continued to be frustrated by the lack and underutilization of pharmacists within primary care and helping primary care manage medical complexity and chronic disease. And so he had offered embedding clinical pharmacists into the practices in a CCM or chronic care model to our primary care doctors at no cost to them through CCM billing. And as that model was piloted, we saw really significant improvements in overall quality score. We saw unnecessary utilization decrease, and there was tremendous stakeholder acceptance and satisfaction both by primary care and the patients. And so this culminated with our need to address these problems that we were facing, to build a new advanced primary care model. And so Upstream was interested in transitioning from fee-for-service to global risk. And so there was a lot of negotiations, ultimately an affiliation formed between the ACO and Upstream, and all our primary care practices agreed to move to the Upstream model with embedded pharmacists. And with that, we expanded that care team to now address not just those that are enrolled in CCM, but all our at-risk Medicare patients. Really worked to stratify, risk adjust those for who would benefit from those services. We expanded the pharmacy model to include concierges to help support the pharmacists and the practice, home-based nurses to address social determinants and other barriers at the home. And so an entire care team was developed to really help facilitate this model. And to address the payment issue, we developed a program called GAP-Q, which is Guaranteed Advance Payments for Quality. And so we were able to take a host of important metrics that are contractually important for MA and governmental programs. The HEDIS measures med adherence along with utilization, and build a composite STAR score for our primary care doctors. And then based on their performance at the time, pay them more real time, $15 to $30 per member per month for all their Medicare attributed lives that are part of Upstream. Not those that are enrolled in CCM, but their entire panel. And for those number of practices that aren't at 4 stars, we had preparatory models. And the bottom line was to pay for value-based care services real time so that practices can understand and resource properly for what they need. But most importantly, it's bringing this team into the clinics to provide and to increase the productivity of the primary care physician by addressing prior authorizations, medications, the social determinants, all the things that burden and keep primary care providers from being able to do what's most important for their physicians, so for their patients. So we have this care model, we have this new payment model, and the digital piece on all of this is the underlying chassis that makes us all possible. With these disparate EMRs, we have so much information coming in that we need to put together and coordinate. We can't ask primary care to sign on to 7 different systems for every payer to look at various different information sources to address various problems and issues. And so Innovaccer allows us to coordinate all that. So all our scheduling work, all our interventions, all the work that we're doing for the care team, the longitudinal care record, and then this is all put into the native EMR. And so another example would be patient ping. So when a patient comes into the emergency room and doesn't get admitted, that automatically goes through Innovaccer into a work stream for our care team to do that type of outreach. So Innovaccer is really the digital solution that's under the hood that really allows us to do this work. And so Liz, you can have some comments on the Innovaccer piece, and then we'd love to have some comments or questions.
Yes, absolutely. Hi, I'm Liz Guerin. I'm the Customer Innovation Director at Innovaccer, and I've been working with Dr. Grapey now 2.5 years. And so one thing I want to highlight before even going into the technology thing, this may be a plug, but I mean it from the bottom of my heart, is the thing that has been so important to me working along. I come from the clinical background, and the way that Upstream has modeled this is so unique, because when we think about it, how do we get teams into a PCP practice, right? And welcome that, because it completely throws off the flow by adding additional team members into the into your practices. And so through Innovaccer, that is the way that we're making that not only it's not an inconvenience, but it's useful. And so at our core, Upstream or Innovaccer is an integration company. We make Spanish, English, Japanese, all of that, meaning anything that is claims data, all these different EMRs, patient ping, any kind of labs, any kind of data feed, all into one common language, English, and let's just use it that way, right? And then we're able to push that to products that we already have developed. And so the beautiful thing is Upstream has been able to leverage a lot of our already out-of-the-box products, like these protocols that can be, for instance, the care teams. Hey, patient is in the ED right now. That's a concierge is notified immediately on a work list. They know to follow a protocol that it is literally just laid out for them. There's also, because they have quite a tech-savvy team that I work quite closely with, they have also done development for certain features that are very, very important to them. And, but really, at the end of the day, the big thing is for this to have worked, the technology allows point of care, meaning this information that we're bringing in, identifying quality gaps, coding gaps, utilization, the protocols of where are we at in the care plan for CCM, all of that to be surfaced when the provider is at just doing an annual wellness visit or anything. That is it part of our technology. It does surface. So anyway, it's been very, very incredible to see how much easier and more welcome it's been for everyone to integrate as an actual team because of the technology, as opposed to us having to do a lot of communication and back and forth. So didn't know if you wanted to add anything.
What I want to add is the vision you heard from Anish. We're the technology company that's trying to take that and make it actionable and save on average about 3.2 minutes of time per patient for the primary care docs by formatting this data as a virtual huddle in team-based care. And I think with that, we can take some questions.
There's got to be one. All right. You got it.
So I'm Barbara Howard. I'm a developmental behavioral pediatrician.
Awesome.
Hey there.
Thank you for what you do.
Hi, thank you. And the founder of Chattis. And Chattis is based on patient-generated health data. And I think one of the things that's really missing in care is having the patient data actually appear there for the clinician before the visit. There's actually information that was published in the New England Journal that showed that with patients who have cancer, adult patients with cancer, their longevity increased by 7 years when they were providing information to the clinicians.
Wow.
So I think this has been an overlooked part of data aggregation and presentation to clinicians, and I wonder if that's something that you're doing in the work that you've got going on with the Innovator, or if we can work with you if we don't.
Absolutely. Let's partner if we're not already doing it.
100%.
We would love to. I'll get your card afterwards. But this platform is designed to be partnered with, right? We're not going to do it all, but creating a underlying matrix so that your vision can be actuated at the point of care.
And so, yeah, and I think that is exactly, while it depends on where that information is coming from, but that's what's lovely is Innovator, again, as I said, at its core at the beginning, it's a data integration company. And so the different forms of data that we can bring in, depending on where we're getting at, like we're bringing in, of course, even just Experian data and more information about the actual patient, but from that clinical level of about, like, for instance, the cancer part, and if that's not communicated, and as long as there is some that is documented somewhere or has been provided, there is no reason we couldn't bring that in.
Thank you for that.
No, that's really, yeah, it's powerful. 7 years.
I mean, one of the things in terms of communication with the patient tools, right? To take data and to interact with the patient in the way that Amazon would shop you or Google would notify you. I was in a clinic with a mom, 3 kids, single, working full time, and we understand that the best time to communicate with that person is after 8 on Tuesday. For example, right? But I left the clinic with her, and by the time she got to the car, she was notified of the pills she was taking, when her follow-up with, but to have that bi-directional to the point you're saying would be a really powerful tool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's part of this whole platform is continued patient engagement. It's not enough to be sort of seeing these patients in the 4 walls of the clinic. And so the whole idea behind all of this and putting this on this chassis is so that we have real-time understanding of where our patients are and what's happened to them. So that means using patient ping to know when they're in their ED or the hospitalization. The concierges are going out and giving constant reminders as part of this platform, so we're continuing to build on that. I have a lot of ideas that can be built on this. One would be shared decision-making. So wouldn't it be nice for the PCP to be able to just send out a shared decision-making tool for a patient who might be facing something with back pain, or to have they've just seen the cardiologist, and to make sure that the patients understand what all their options are. So within this chassis, so many people have unbelievable great programs. I've seen this. But the problem is you can't have a patient on their heart failure program and then their different diabetes program. And then, one of the problems is the same thing that happens with specialist care. When we have all these technology platforms, unfortunately, sometimes they end up fragmenting care even more. And so the whole idea is, yes, some people have great solutions. We can't build all those. An innovator won't be able to build all those. But the idea is we can take either something, if it's not buildable in Innovator, we can take it from a different company and integrate it, so that all these disparate systems can be integrated into one. And I think that's really what helps primary care and the patient and defragment things.
We have a couple minutes left. We can take another question.
Please.
I'm going to begin microphone.
So thank you for that. I'm wondering, thinking about the integration not only with primary care and specialists and behavioral health, et cetera, how does this platform, Innovacer, work to integrate with public health and social services?
Oh, that's a really important and exciting question.
Yeah.
So there are 80 to 100 sources of public data out there, information around social determinants of health and public health. Pulling that in and understanding down to the census code level of what's happening, and then taking a little bit of AI and making that down to the individual patient level with 4 or 5 questions about where they're at in terms of their public health status, their immunization status, and their nutritional status and economic status makes a huge difference in outcome. We had an episode in Iowa with one of our clients who had an uptick in hospitalization for our type 2 diabetics with hypoglycemic hospitalization events. And what we figured out pretty quickly was we had run into a population that was running out of food. And then linking them in to, in Iowa, they have a community health workers, and they have through Aunt Bertha access to food banks, and then being able to monitor whether they actually access those services, hugely important. Made a big difference, nipped it in the bud, as an example.
And of course, the nice thing about this care team model with nurses going out, the pharmacists doing these assessments, this is part and parcel to what it's point of care assessment too. So it's great to have analytic data about social determinants and how that may, we use analytics, we have rising risk. So there's a lot of things we do to determine the risk level of a patient, but there's nothing better than going and asking the patient what barriers they have, or going to their house and seeing that there are barriers that maybe they're embarrassed to talk about, where you can really address those things. So it is through data and it is through analytics, but it's also through the assessments, the point of care, and being there for the patient to determine those things as well.
Yeah, I would like to add to that. So, okay.
Last one.
I get to close out. No, so this is very dear to my heart. I used to do care management in a hospital, and I think to really emphasize what Dr. Grapey said. Yes, we bring in at a zip code level details about, hey, there might be lack of food in this zip code, or even at a patient level through Experian. But something that is the most critical is the Find Hope or Unite Us, by utilizing that. And it's not just using the data, right? Like, we find out that, hey, a patient is through the protocols and talking with the patient, the clinical teams, being able to then really actually operationalize that and have, hey, we know that this group of patients is the most vulnerable based on risk, and combine that with they have housing and food issues. You are able to create your own almost curated lists that then the care teams follow a protocol to address those. And I think that's where the power is. It's not really about the data. It's about what can we use with the data, which is what you were just emphasizing. So that's how we've been playing it out.
One of our partners has their responsibility. The only thing that they do is identify folks who are eligible for federal and state programs like CHIP, for example, right? And collaborating that with primary care so that in an automated sort of format, they get notified that there's a person in that practice who isn't on CHIP but could be eligible for CHIP, and then a call center begins to respond to that need. At UPMC, for example, that saved them about 3.7% of total cost by getting that population into these federally and state programs. I mean, just as an example. I think we're a wrap. Thank you very much, everybody.